There's something happening right now that doesn't make sense. People are earning more money than they did 10 years ago. Median household income has gone up. Salaries, at least on paper, have increased, and yet, more people feel financially stretched than ever before. How is that possible? How can income go up, and life feel less affordable at the same time? That's not supposed to happen. That's not how progress is supposed to work. And if you've caught yourself thinking, I make decent money, so why does this still feel tight? You're not imagining it. Something real has changed, and today we're going to break down exactly what that is, because the middle-class life still exists. But the number of people who can actually afford it has quietly shrunk. Let's start with what middle class actually looks like today. Not the idea of it, the real version. A modest home. A reliable car, healthcare, some savings, occasional travel. Nothing extravagant, just stability. Now let's put numbers to that. The median home price in the US is hovering around $400,000 at current interest rates near 6.5%, with a standard down payment that's roughly $2,500 to $3,000 per month once you include taxes and insurance. Add a car payment, say $500. Insurance, another $200. Groceries for a family, $600 to $900. Healthcare, $400 to $800 depending on coverage. Utilities, subscriptions, basic life expenses, another $500 to $800. We haven't even touched childcare yet. Or student loans. Or saving for retirement. Add everything up, and a very normal middle class life lands somewhere between $5,000 to $7,000 per month. After tax. Here's what that means in actual numbers. To comfortably support that lifestyle, you need to be earning somewhere in the range of $90,000 to $140,000 per year depending on your location. And that's not luxury. That's baseline. Now here's the problem. The median household income in the US is about $75,000, which means a large percentage of households are mathematically short of sustaining what used to be considered a normal life. Not because they're irresponsible, not because they're overspending, because the numbers don't line up anymore, and that's where the disconnect begins. But that was only part of the story, because this didn't happen overnight. This wasn't one bad year. This was a sequence. Over the last decade, 3 major shifts happened at the same time. First, housing. Between 2020 and 2022 alone, home prices jumped dramatically across most of the country. At the same time, mortgage rates doubled. Which means people weren't just paying more for homes, they were paying more for the cost of borrowing. Second, everyday expenses. Food, insurance, utilities, healthcare, these didn't spike once. They crept up consistently. Quietly. Relentlessly. So slowly that you didn't notice it week to week, but enough that your monthly budget started feeling tighter. And third, expectations. This one is subtle, but important. The definition of normal expanded. A reliable car became a $40,000 vehicle. A starter home became a $400,000 purchase. Convenience became subscription-based, comfort became expensive, and none of these things feel excessive. They feel standard, which is exactly why they're dangerous. Now here's where this gets more structural. Because the real issue isn't just rising costs. It's the relationship between income and cost. In the past, income and expenses moved somewhat together. If costs rose, wages eventually followed. Today, that relationship has weakened. Costs adjust quickly, income adjusts slowly, sometimes not at all, which creates a gap. And that gap is where financial pressure lives. Let's bring this down to one person. Call him Daniel. He's 34. Works in a stable job. Makes $85,000 a year. No major debt. Doesn't overspend. By any traditional definition, Daniel should be middle class. But here's what his numbers look like. Rent or mortgage, $2,400 car plus insurance, $700 groceries, $700 healthcare, $500 utilities plus essentials, $600. That's already $4,900 per month. After tax, Daniel takes home around $5,200. That leaves him $300. For savings, for emergencies, for anything unexpected. 1 expense, car repair, medical bill, rent increase, and he's behind. Daniel isn't failing, the system he's operating in has shifted, and this is where a lot of people get stuck mentally, because they assume, if I just earn a little more, this will fix itself. Sometimes it does. Often, it doesn't. Because the target keeps moving. At some point people always ask, is this just temporary? And this is where we need to correct a common assumption. This is not a short-term problem, and it's not going to snap back to what it used to be. This is not like a market dip. Or a temporary inflation spike. This is structural. housing supply is still constrained. Costs of living are not reversing in a meaningful way, and wages, while improving, are not catching up fast enough, which means the middle-class threshold has moved. Quietly, without announcement, without anyone officially redefining it, and most people are still aiming for the old version. That's the real problem. Now here's the twist. The middle class hasn't disappeared. It has split. There are still people living that life comfortably, but they usually fall into one of three categories. They bought assets early, they have dual incomes, or they earn significantly above median. Everyone else is trying to maintain the same lifestyle with a different economic foundation. And that creates pressure. So what happens next? The honest answer is, not a dramatic collapse. Not a sudden fix. Something slower. A gradual adjustment. People delay buying homes, they downsize expectations, they share expenses, they move to lower-cost areas. Or they redefine what middle class means for themselves. And that's not necessarily failure. It's adaptation. But it requires awareness. Because if you're still chasing the old model without adjusting your strategy, you'll always feel behind. Even if you're doing everything right. So what can you actually do? This is where most videos stay vague. Let's not do that. First, separate identity from lifestyle. Owning a home is not the only path to stability. If the numbers don't work, they don't work. Second, focus on margin. Not just income. If your expenses grow with your income, nothing changes. Control the gap. That's where freedom lies. Third, think in decades, not years. Short-term discomfort doesn't define long-term outcomes. Consistent investing, even in smaller amounts, compounds over time. And fourth, this matters more than anything, stop measuring yourself against outdated benchmarks. Because the system changed, and pretending it didn't, doesn't help you navigate it. Let's bring this back to where we started. People are earning more than ever, and yet, life feels tighter. That's not your imagination. That's a mismatch between expectation and reality. The middle class still exists. But it requires different numbers, different decisions, and a different understanding of how the system works. You're not behind. You're just operating in a version of the economy that no longer matches the one you were told to expect. And once you understand that, you can stop guessing and start making decisions that actually work for you.